Oops, that's what I get for being silly. Good afternoon, everyone. We're glad you've joined us. If you are on with us, you are attending our Rochester Community Schools Town Hall meeting for secondary education for us to answer questions regarding moving forward with our return to school plan, whether that be your choice of virtual, in person, or should we need to pivot to remote, we'll be able to do that. We'll start out today with a few opening remarks. First of all, I'm going to let my colleagues introduce themselves. I have a few things I'd like to say about the budget and just kind of our process, and then we'll jump right into the questions that we secured through the thought exchange process. We're glad you're with us, and let's get started. Carrie, would you begin?
Sure, thanks, Bob. Welcome, everyone. I'm Carrie Lawler. I'm the Assistant Superintendent for Secondary Schools and Diversity and Inclusion for Rochester Community Schools. A former high school principal myself, a high school assistant principal, a high school teacher, and a middle school teacher. So I'm excited to talk today about the offerings that we have for all of our secondary students. Debbie?
Yes, good afternoon. I'm Debbie Fragamenti. I'm the Deputy Superintendent for Teaching and Learning. We're grateful for your time today, and we look forward to clarifying some of the questions that have come forward. And we truly appreciate the questions that you have been submitting, along with communicating at the building level to get answers clarified. So that's our intent today. So thank you. Dr. Shaner?
Thank you. Again, we're so pleased that you've joined us. If you didn't get a chance to watch our work session for the Board of Education last night, I know we're putting that out there in chunks. That way you can watch the part of the presentation that most fits you. The presentation, I think, is broke down in an introduction, an operations and budgeting section, and then in the instructional component. And we're putting the instructional component out first, as that is probably where the most questions lie in terms of what's school going to look like. I think the first and foremost thing that I want to discuss, and just take a second here, and I know I'm seizing the bully pulpit a little bit, but I think it's important just to set a little context. We started this process of a task force last February. We shifted to remote learning very quickly in the face of probably one of the largest crises we've faced in a very, very long time. And then the governor formed a Return to School Advisory Council, of which I'm a member of, and issued a Return to School plan on June the 30th, right before the 4th of July. It is July the 28th. So the work that you see from the board presentation last night and things that we're about to talk about have been done in a very, very compressed time frame. And I'm just so grateful to the awesome team of professionals that I have the pleasure of working with. Not only that are on this call with us, but the literally hundreds of people that are doing really, really important work in the service of their kids. And the reason they're doing that work is because they love your children and they love the work that they do with your children. So again, thank you for being with us. I just want to start out a little bit also a little bit, sorry, I'm very tired. This is my third Zoom call today, and about I think I'm up to about 7 hours on Zoom. So I might get timed out. So you may have seen a Channel 7 story early this week about what school may look like. I know some folks were a little bit put off that that information went out before we informed the community. And just let me give you a little bit of context of how these things work. First of all, I have no control over when a broadcast company decides to broadcast a news segment. So that I wish I had control, but I didn't. But the way that comes about is every once in a while I get advocacy organizations that'll ask me to serve as an expert and provide a story to a news organization so we can bring awareness to something that impacts public education. And one of those things is what school might look like moving forward. So I had a decision to make, and I knew there was a possibility that information might get out in front of you a little bit before the board presentation. But I thought it was worth taking that risk because it was an opportunity to advocate for our organization and for your kids, and I did that. So that is how that came about. And one of the reasons we continue to do these stories is the budget. If you're not aware of it, the 1920 budget, we thought we were going to get prorated. There was a budget deal between the Senate and House leadership and the governor, and we were able to close that budget gap. And that also secures our seat time waiver and our days and hours requirement until October 1st. So when we shifted to remote learning, we needed something called a seat time waiver because there is seat time that's required by law in the state of Michigan. And that seat time is 1,090 hours and 180 days. I think I have that right. So we needed relief from that, and we got that. Under the supplemental budget that the Senate, House, and the governor came to agreement on, we are good until October 1st. After October 1st, we don't have a plan for a seat time waiver, days and hours, or attendance. And moreover, we do not have any prediction of what our revenue is going to be for the 2021 school year at this point. Generally speaking, in years past, we would have a budget somewhere along the lines of the end of June to the beginning of July. By law, the school district has to pass a budget by July 1 and submit it. The state's fiscal year ends October 1st, so you can see there's a confrontation there. And I really just share that to put out some of the challenges that we're up against as a school community. And if you haven't, if you're not familiar with the way schools are funded in Michigan, I would really urge you to go on our website and look at our budget explainer. It's a real quick whiteboard animation, like a Sir Ken Burns animation. Take you 2 minutes, and I think it gives you a good thumbnail sketch of how schools, and particularly how Rochester Schools is funded and what level we're funded at in comparison to the rest of the school districts in the county. It has been a challenging 5 months, ladies and gentlemen, and we are blessed to work with educators that are very dedicated to your children. But we have many challenges ahead of us. Even shifting to virtual or remote or in person is very difficult. And remember, because we're putting forth a plan like we're required by executive order, that doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to execute that plan. And it also doesn't mean we're not going to adjust that plan. There is a significant possibility that we begin the school year remotely. We haven't made that decision yet. We'll make that collectively as a team, and I'll own the responsibility for that. But the reality of it is we are up against some significant challenges. Some of them have to do with the virus. Some of them have to do with policy issues. But most importantly, our first order of business is to keep our staff and our students safe. And there's some significant barriers or hurdles we're going to have to get over before we can ensure that happens. So I think they've set the context as best as I can. We'll try to, the way this will work is I'll read through the questions that we received in Thought Exchange, and some of them I'll answer, some of them the three of us will kind of play off one another and share the information that we have. If you have further questions or concerns after this, please feel free to hit the Talk to Us button. Feel free to call me directly, call Debbie, call Carrie, call your building principals, of course, and we'll help you out the best we possibly can. We know this is a fluid situation. We know that we're going to have to be very flexible and accommodating as you decide what the answer is for your student. And I would offer you this. I said this last night. I said it earlier in an elementary call. There's the right answer for your student is the right answer for your student and your family. There's no wrong answer here if you're choosing what's best for you and your family. And please, as you move forward in this decision-making process, know that there's people here to support you. Know that you have our patience and our grace in making that decision, and we'll help and support you as much as we can. So let's begin with the question, shall we? All right, what will the day look like for a middle school, high school student? Same classroom, same cohort, lunch at desk, scheduled bathroom breaks. Kristen Bull said this very eloquently last night. You know, school is not going to look like we would like it to look. It is going to be different, and we can't help that. The best thing we can do is set a great example for our students and provide them with our students and our staff the safest environment that we can. There's three things that that are kind of pillars in our plan, and that's hygiene, cohorting, and face masks, face shields, face coverings, I guess I would say. We know that the research is that there's good longitudinal research on face coverings and their impact on mitigation. When we come to social distancing and some of those things, there's not as good a longitudinal data. And from being on the governor's return to school advisory council, I was able to hear some pretty renowned epidemiologists talk to the fact that face coverings are very important, and face coverings also to some degree mitigate the need to social distance. Social distancing is still important, but if you notice in the CDC guidelines, it's 3 to 6 feet now. And I can tell you this, 6 feet of social distancing is logistically not feasible in our school district. It's not logistically feasible from an architectural standpoint. It's not feasible from a transportation standpoint. And it's not feasible from what Doc Brown in Back to the Future would say, in a time-space continuum standpoint. When you start factoring in things like hygiene, cafeteria, transportation, getting kids in and out of the building, all of this bites into instructional time, and we're trying to balance and manage that as we plan forward. So I'm going to be quiet for a second and let Debbie and Carrie talk to that question, because I feel like I've talked too much.
Well, I can take a stab at some of the questions. It's a string of them. In terms of keeping students in the same classroom, you know that students at secondary level have 6 classes per day. Then they could be all over a very large campus, you know, a very large building. So we were looking at the potential to limit that number, not have 6 classes in a day, but look at 3 classes in a day to try to keep them in a more defined area. And then even linking possibly some of those classes. So they might have the same kids in like 2 of the 3 hours. So there's limited movement during the day. That's one of the plans we're looking at. There's still a lot of work to do to sort that out and see if that can work. In terms of lunch at the desk, we're looking at lunch in the cafeteria. Chartwell's, our food company, has done a fabulous job of making a lot of plans for that. Students wouldn't have options like salad bar where students touch the same things that other students touched. So more like boxed and bagged lunches. But we would spread out our lunchrooms into, first of all, try to schedule 4 different lunches during the day. Some students would start lunch pretty early, close to 10 o'clock. In order for that to happen, but that would allow us to have fewer students in the lunchroom and spread the lunchroom out into the auxiliary gym, perhaps, if that can work in the building. So wouldn't probably be in a classroom. And then the last part of the question was scheduled bathroom breaks. I don't think we're going to schedule bathroom breaks, but we will limit, you know, students who leave a classroom to probably 1 student leaving a classroom at a time, which isn't much different than what we do now. So Debbie, anything I missed in that?
No, I think one thing that was on Dr. Shaner's Channel 7 video was just the logistics of social distancing in a classroom. There's some examples of that. And as he mentioned, that creatively and innovatively, we're coming up with opportunities to provide space for children, but it will not be, we are not capable of making that in the classroom at a social distance level.
At 6 feet, we would literally need double the number of classrooms. And you know, to add a complicating factor to that, staffing is something that we're working through. One of the reasons we've asked people to make a decision by August 1st about virtual is I know that's an arbitrary date. I know many of you it's caused consternation, and for that I'm sorry. But we're asking for your help here, because in a normal year, we'd be able to predict our enrollment somewhere for the next year, along about March. We used a linear regression model by a company that does modeling by the name of Decision Insight. We'd be able to predict our enrollment, and we would start to do our staffing. Our staffing normally would take between 3 and 4 months. We're going to do staffing for the entire school district in the timeline of about 3 weeks. So if you can make a decision, please do. If you can't, please let us know, and we'll try to help you with information. And if it's just not time for you to make a decision yet, again, we'll accommodate. But if you can help us out, we'd greatly appreciate it. You know, one of the things that Carrie mentioned about the cafeteria, we're very blessed to have Chartwell's as a team member with us. They have really been at the forefront of having some really, really good planning about cafeteria plans in schools across the nation. And we really felt like the cafeteria plan was what our kids know, and it's something that we can manage. But I want to be sure it's not going to be the cafeteria that you're used to. We're not going to be stuffing 200 kids into a cafeteria where they're going to be able to congregate and talk and move around. It's just going to be different, and it's similar to what not using lockers and trying to have one-way traffic in hallways and get kids in the building and out of the building as quickly as possible and as far apart as possible. It's just going to be very different. And again, if we execute this plan on August 31st, so be it. But we also need to have a plan to be able to deviate from if we implement it at a different time. So I think we've spoken to that question. Why don't we move on, and maybe we can loop back and maybe inform that question a little bit more as well. Let's see, particularly at middle school where students have 6 different teachers in classrooms, what is the policy if the teacher or student tests positive? Heard this question a lot. This is one of those choke points that I'm very concerned about, quite frankly. Right now, we're finding out that testing results are taking us from 3 to 14 days. It's the contact tracing part of the testing is our responsibility. So you can see if we don't get test results in 3 to 14 days, how that complicates the contact tracing part of this. And also what the governor's plan says is that we're to work in collaboration with the local health department. So at this time, we continue to wait for direction from the Oakland County Health Division. It's my understanding that we're going to have some direction tomorrow. There must be something about Wednesdays. Wednesday, we're supposed to get direction from the whole Oakland County Health Division on protocols and what happens if someone tests positive, what happens if they're symptomatic, what happens if they're asymptomatic, what happens if they're hospitalized, so on and so forth. And supposedly, we're also supposed to get direction from Michigan High School Athletic Association tomorrow about moving forward with athletics. So the short answer on that question is we don't know yet. And I will tell you this, until I have an answer to that question, we will not be moving forward with in-person instruction. That is something that I feel very strongly about. Again, please don't leave this meeting and say, hey, Shaner says we're going remote. What I'm saying is that is a critical function that we have to have fleshed out before we invite people back into our buildings. Anything to add?
I believe the one piece is we're very fortunate to have a full-time school nurse.
Yeah.
And Dr. Shaner, his work has been very deliberate to include epidemiology information, and Oakland County will be providing some additional nurses that are being hired at this time, and Rochester will have 4 more, along with Tanya Richmont, who is our district nurse. And so I just think it's important that you know that as we're going through and adjusting, we're utilizing the resources of the medical teams to help guide our instructions.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
If you aren't staggering students and everyone starts at the same time, how will they be able to socially distance in already crowded hallways, classrooms, and school entrances? That's a really good question. It's a really difficult one to solve. If you're not aware of it, we're 66 square miles and we put over 112 buses on the road every day. So again, although the notion of a staggered start seems like a great idea, logistically, it's not feasible when you factor in being able to feed kids, be able to give them time for hand washing and hygiene, and try to protect instructional time. The hallways, the movement in hallways, we will definitely be controlling. We're going to really try to have longer passing time and staggered passing times, so there's fewer kids in the hallway. Because remember, in between every time kids switch a class, whether it's every 2 hours, every 3 hours, or every hour, if there's different kids in that classroom, the surfaces in that classroom have to be cleaned. They have to be disinfected. Actually, one of our cabinet members, Matt McDaniel, actually went with the custodial crew and cleaned desks themselves to try to get an understanding of how long it would take. We think 10 minutes is about reasonable to get through a classroom and cleaning surfaces. Again, this is factoring in another thing you'll notice in classrooms, that unnecessary surfaces we're going to have to put in storage. So anything with cloth on it, we're going to put in storage. Anything that's a touch surface that really isn't needed for classroom instruction is going to get put in storage. And we hope that's a step in the right direction in a way to mitigate risk.
I would add too, Bob, that secondary students are expected to wear masks all day long. So, the social distancing isn't quite as critical, but they need to be in masks from the beginning to the end. We're also going to not utilize lockers this year at the secondary level. And I'm sorry for especially our middle school friends who really like to decorate those lockers. We're not going to start the year with those. So that causes a lot of congregating in a hallway in one area with a lot of people. Our lockers are about a foot wide. So by not using those, we would ask students to come into the building and go directly to their first hour class. So they really try to stay close to that cohort. Yeah.
Moving through the day, how are desks and rooms sanitized between classes? Many of the things that we're talking about are also have to do with staff members' working conditions. So we continue to collaborate with our colleagues in the union leadership to make sure that we can have an equitable way to get these things done and make sure they're respecting people's working conditions. At this point, every time kids move out of a room, that surface has to be cleaned, and every 4 hours they have to be cleaned no matter what. So we are coming up with procedures to do that. At a secondary level, we would probably think about asking our staff to help with cleaning those surfaces, but we are still working through exactly who's responsible for those procedures at the time. But again, it's going to be really, really important for us to clean those surfaces every time kids come and go out of a room. And then every 4 hours, surfaces have to get disinfected no matter what.
Our custodial teams are also working at the state level to study best practices. Our teams are working closely with the HVAC system and the air considerations to ensure that those environments have the high quality of air distribution. So I know there've been a lot of questions on if we're paying attention to that. And the overall learning environment is being explored before decisions are made to bring children back.
Yeah, we're definitely paying attention to the physical plant. I think we also might mention that we've turned off all of our drinking fountains. We'll use the touchless bottle fillers still, but drinking fountains will not be used. Are you still working on a more robust virtual academy for secondary? 1 hour a week of direct instruction is not comparable to in person. Well, let Carrie speak to this, but I think the first thing for folks to get their mind around is virtual learning is a different modality of learning, and it doesn't fit everybody. I'll let Carrie speak to that.
So, and we've done a lot of research, and I want to throw kudos to the large team of teachers, counselors, and administrators who sat through demonstrations from 7 or 8 different companies on what kind of virtual learning they could offer us, and then decided at the end we could do better. So we decided to create our own courses, which caused some limitations, but also is going to cause a better program in the end. When you look at virtual academies, they're meant to be flexible. They're not meant to be synchronous learning. It's not supposed to be the same thing as attending 6 hours a day with a teacher at the times that the teacher dictates. So it's much more self-paced, so that if a student wants to work during the day and take their classes at night, they can do that. So it isn't, virtual academies across the country are designed to be very asynchronous. So 1 hour per week with a teacher. There could be more contact than that. There'll be drop-in times, there will be office hours and things like that. But that's on par, or actually more than a lot of other virtual academies or virtual campuses provide. So that's our goal, is to make it flexible. If we had to have every student who's home wanting to do virtual school start at 7:30 in the morning, I think they'd choose a different program. So people like that flexibility. That's the big piece of it, I think.
I would just like to add, as decisions were being made about what system of virtual would go forward, ultimately, the question always is what is best for our kids. And what we believe is very best for the students of Rochester is a highly qualified, talented Rochester Community Schools teacher. And that was ultimately the decision to how we were going to move forward. We believe that the relationships that are cultivated, the talent and the passion of our teachers who are exceptional are the best opportunity for every child to receive the high quality of education that they all deserve. And so I think that's really important in what makes the virtual unique. Virtual is coming into place certainly because of our current condition, but we're looking at this as a result as well that we're going to be growing this virtual program because what we find is this learning environment suits some of our families and children in a very good way. And so this is something that we're going to continue to grow, and the coursework will continue to expand as we continue to provide opportunities in the future. And as Dr. Shaner said, we are taking a roadmap from the 30th of June. It's July 28th. Thank you. July 28th. And we need to have a proposal ready to the governor by August 15th. So a lot of the questions that come forward to what could be offered in virtual, we do have some limitations, but please know, and I know Carrie has mentioned this, and along with our secondary teams, we have over 100 secondary staff right now that are investing 24 hours a day into providing courses for our students this fall. Unprecedented. They're ready, they're hungry to do what's right for kids, and we couldn't be any more proud of them. And so with the virtual, although it may look to have some limitations to begin, it has the opportunity for the right situation for your family to provide that flexibility, and it will look different than in-person remote, and it's intended to do that moving forward. I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, and if you have questions about what courses might be offered, please contact your building principal. We will try to build it based on need, and then also try to find courses for kids in other platforms if absolutely necessary. But our intent is to put our kids in front of a highly skilled, caring Rochester teacher each and every time that we possibly can. How will you protect students from harassment from other students for following the rules? There's already a culture of mean is cool in middle school. I have a middle school child myself, and I know, it's middle school is a tough time to grow up. People often say when they look back over their lives that the best time of my life was when I was in high school. I don't ever remember hearing anyone say the best time of my life was in middle school for a lot of different reasons, right? The adolescence is tough. Those kids need a lot of love around them and a lot of support. But I think this is a great question, and I'll tell you why. It gives us an opportunity to speak to our priorities in the school district. Last year, before we entered into the crisis, well before we entered the crisis, we committed to becoming a trauma-informed school district. We will continue that work to be trauma-informed, to build relationships from that basis, and to set examples for children from that basis. We also continue our diversity, equity, and inclusion work. And I feel strongly that those two things, along with our professional development and our hygiene education for students, we'll be able to work through that some of that middle school mischief, if you will. We never tolerate harassment. We never tolerate bullying at Rochester Community Schools. You often hear me say in letters to the community that everyone has a right to feel safe, valued, and respected, and we mean it. But I also feel like we're expanding and developing our culture, so we're more understanding of each other and more supportive of each other, whether it be something in terms of culture or something in terms of a health requirement like wearing a face covering. So we'll work together with our community and with our building principals to ensure that the kids are in a great place. If other districts can offer accelerated and AP courses through their virtual programs, why can't RCS? I'm not sure which other districts we're speaking to, but I'll let Carrie talk about, again, our course development and what we worked on first and what we continue to work on. And I just want to remind people too, we're still working on it.
Absolutely. It'll be a work in progress for years to come, I imagine. We had to start our virtual program by building our most often taken courses. So we really started with all of the basic courses in the 4 core areas plus world language, and added in some electives and even kind of combined those to be electives that can service students in many different grade levels. So really trying to take our teaching force, like Debbie said, we have 100 teachers working on this, and it takes a long time to build an online course, and we're building them in the Moodle program. So for years we have used as a schedule fix, if you will, of, sometimes 2 classes are scheduled in the same hour and it's the only hour it's offered. So a student who wants both has to take one virtually. And so we know that the courses that are offered for AP courses, for instance, through Michigan Virtual are good courses. You can't call yourself an AP course just because you said it's an AP course. It has to be vetted through the College Board, which oversees all AP courses. You have to submit your syllabus and the teacher's certification and the book that you're going to use and all of that material. So we know that an AP course is an AP course no matter where you take it. So we will eventually create more AP courses in our own program that are created by our teachers and taught by our teachers. But with the time, 2-month time frame, we had to pick and choose, and we know those are good courses in Michigan Virtual. So a student who wants to take AP courses, and I want to say the limit of 2 is if you're like in person, you can take up to 2 Michigan Virtual courses, but that would not apply in the virtual school. So you could take more than 2 AP courses if that's what you have on your docket. And in terms of the accelerated, we've been looking at that. I've had, this is at 6th and 7th and 8th grade. I've been looking at options for that. We do have the 8th grade accelerated math because it's Algebra 1, the same thing we take in high school, but we are looking at creating, not using Moodle and all the other courses are being created in, but we have access to another course in Edgenuity that we are looking at developing for the 6th and 7th grade accelerated math courses. So hopefully we'll be able to add those into our mix for all the courses that we have available. And we'll be able to add in the AP courses that students want at the high school level through Michigan Virtual. Eventually we'll have our own.
Thank you, Carrie. Appreciate that. Yeah, it was hard for me to stay quiet as a former AP history teacher, but I did. I was successful. Will in-person school be like regular school just with masks? This is when you think back of how you communicated and how you get information out, this is probably a little bit of a regret of mine. When we put our vision out for what school, our return to school plan might look like, I think people, based on what they heard, thought that we were just going to go back to school wearing masks. And like Kristen Bowles said last night, like I'm going to say again now, unfortunately, that's not the case. School will not look like what we're used to. School will not, if you think about elementary school, we're not going to be able to let kids congregate by the tunnel on the playground and go through it together. We're not going to be using lockers. I'll ask Carrie to talk about band and choir in a little bit, but that's something that's so near and dear to the culture of a high school and so important to the kids. And it's something that we're really going to have to look at long and hard and how to execute that safely. So yeah, we're going to be wearing masks, but we're going to be doing a lot of other things when we return to in-person instruction to mitigate risks. We can't eliminate risks, but we can mitigate. And we'll do our very best. Our staff certainly has a right to be safe at work, and our students have a right to be safe at school. So we'll continue to do that work, continue to keep you informed. If my student chooses the virtual campus and does not have access to accelerated or advanced courses, will they have a way to get back on track?
Yes, absolutely. We don't know what that is quite yet, but we'll either have a test or we'll just have a waiver or some way for students to get back. We're also going to ask our teachers in those courses that are virtual to understand that and help out a student who wants to get back to an accelerated track to make sure that they stay on par as much as they can, and will help that student with whatever extra work they might need. So we've got a couple of different approaches of that.
In virtual campus, will my student have a teacher from his school? This is something I'm gonna just speak to this generally, and Carrie and Debbie can speak to it specifically. But this is another choke point for our school district in terms of opening to in-person instruction. You know, I'm certain we have employees that are health compromised that may not be able to return for in-person instruction. Depending on what our enrollment looks like, we may have to adjust staffing. So I can say, generally speaking, I can't guarantee anyone's going to have, we may have some movement in the district where teachers get transferred from one building to the other. The other things that we're going to have to worry about is we used to have traveling teachers, right? Maybe, for instance, the Chinese teacher might travel between 3 schools. We're not going to be able to do that anymore. So we're going to have to figure out something different to be able to do that, because we can't have an adult traveling between buildings and traveling between so many kids when we're trying to do cohorting the best we possibly can. Scheduling, I can't say this enough, scheduling in this environment in this short a period of time will be nothing short of a miracle. We have really, really talented people though, and I'm very confident they'll be able to do it. But I'll let Carrie and Debbie speak a little bit more to the staffing situation.
Yeah, in virtual campus, our teachers will be taken from all of our secondary schools. So they might be teaching like 8th grade English and 9th grade English even. It could even cross from middle school to high school. So it'll be a Rochester Community Schools teacher. It will not be necessarily the classroom teacher that your student would have had if they were in person, but it will be somebody who's attended all the same trainings, all the same professional development, and knows the curriculum inside and out, just like every other teacher that we have. So that, we can assure you of that. We will be scheduling the virtual students as all one big high school and all one big middle school, and to be efficient and effective with making sure that we can fill the classes and make sure that students get the classes that they want.
Thank you, Carrie.
Mm-hmm.
Believe it or not, we're down to our last question, but don't worry, I can always fill time. No, just kidding. Why don't you have half of the students attend at one time and the other half of the students at a different time? I would, if you didn't get a chance to see the presentation by Tanya Richmond, our school nurse, last night, I would urge you to watch that. There's a lot of logistical challenges. I would say nothing's off the table at this point in terms of scheduling. But I would say this, nothing's a panacea in this situation. So having half the students at one point and half the students at another point, that doesn't give our adults less exposure if there's somebody carrying the virus. And it also complicates our cleaning procedures and many other things in terms of cafeteria and transportation. It's something that, again, nothing's off the table because this is such a dynamic situation. But we feel pretty strongly that the most efficient and safest way to do this is 5-day-a-week instruction, and particularly for people that have childcare issues as well in a hybrid environment. Maybe not with high school kids so much, but with elementary kids, that creates a childcare conundrum for our working parents. Debbie, Carrie, anything to add?
I would just like to add, and Tanya can certainly speak to this as well in the future in FAQs, but we're also, with the uncertainty of quarantine looks like, what, if we have a classroom environment that we need to do some contract tracing to, the idea of the hybrid connection gives more complexity to break that down. And one of the challenges that we're really facing right now is the contact tracing and the testing is the results are taking from 3 to over 10 days. And so that really has big implications. And that's another worry we have about people who might be exposed to the virus and not having a time frame to be able to successfully quarantine our students and putting more staff and students at risk.
Yeah. One of the questions we got asked by the elementary folks is what happens if a student gets sick in terms of making up work and all that. And you know, to me, we have a lot of experience with that. We have, unfortunately, in any given year, kids that become seriously ill with a whole menu of different things. And we've always worked to accommodate and made sure they got their work. And I think even last year, you may have seen the news story with a young man. He actually had a robot go to school for him so he could watch school because it wasn't safe for him to be in school because of the treatment he was going under. And we would definitely accommodate however we can to make sure kids get the material. You know, someone sent a talk to us, and I don't know when it was, the other day, maybe it was today. And I said this at the board meeting last night, but the talk to us said something like this: don't you think it's a little hypocritical to have a virtual board meeting to talk about in-person instruction? And I guess it's a little bit of hypocrisy and a little bit of irony, right? But at the end of the day, we can only do what we can do. And right now, the executive order prohibits us from having large crowds, so we can't have an in-person board meeting. But don't think I don't feel it. I feel the same irony, the same hypocrisy, and I don't mind poking a little bit of fun at myself. It is a little bit hypocritical that we say, let's have a virtual board meeting, discuss in-person instruction. But at some point we are, and we have to have hope that we are, and we will, I promise you that. Someday we're going to bring kids back to school and we will be back to normal, and we have to have a way to plan. And the only way to have a plan is to have a plan to deviate from. You know, I went a whole hour without talking about my experience in the Marine Corps, and I just blew it. But one of the things that we used to say when we were planning for an operation when I was in the Marine Corps was no good plan survives first contact. So what does that mean? That means the minute that you hit the beach or the minute you step out of a chopper or whatever, however you got to the battlefield, the plan changed and you had to deviate from your plan. But the most important thing was that you had a great plan to deviate from. And I really feel like with a team of people that we have that care and love your kids so much and care about the work that they do, that we have a plan that may not survive first contact, but we have a plan that we can definitely adjust from whenever that time comes. And if we end up having to shift to remote, even if that's at the start of the school year, I feel very strongly that our team has come up with something that's far more rigorous, mirrors more of a normal in-person school day, and provides for much more in-person contact for our students. And most importantly, I think, provides for far more social emotional support and a more systemic basis. And I think that's really, really cool. Our team has a plan for wellness checks for all of our students. And I think that is really walking the talk that we've had about being trauma informed and making sure that we're taking care of kids' social emotional health. So anything to add, Carrie, Debbie?
I would add just one other thing that I think the planning is going to make a difference for is when we start the school year, every teacher is going to get their entire class on Google Classroom, and that will be the platform. So parents won't have to look for the homework. Like if you did have to be quarantined for a short period of time, everything will be available in one place. So I think that's going to make it a lot easier for teachers and for students to stay connected and make sure that they have access to anything that they want to have access to.
Absolutely.
Go
ahead,
I'm
Debbie. Sorry. No.
I wanted to add also that we earlier today had a town hall with our staff, and we know how essential they are to our system, and they are the colleagues that chose a profession because of their passion to serve kids. And so a lot of professional development is going into the planning before our staff come back, so that they feel confident in terms of the protocols that are in place, so they can help families, especially if you have a medically fragile situation, that they will have that information. The administrators will be involved in that. So it won't be one person's responsibility, it's all of our responsibility. And as Dr. Shaner and Carrie have said, we're invested greatly into social emotional learning and equity and inclusion and belonging. And the task is before us, and we are rising to the challenge.
Well, believe it or not, those are the questions we have at this point. If you have more questions, or we have not answered questions but created more in your mind, which is entirely possible, please feel free to contact your building administrator, contact Carrie, contact Debbie, contact me. If you have elementary school children, please feel free to contact Corey or your building principals in that phase of our operation. I think I'd like to close, ladies and gentlemen, just really talking about the opportunity before us. When I think about COVID and what we've lost and what we're grieving, and we certainly are all grieving something, right? We're grieving maybe a vacation that we didn't get to take with our families. And, that sounds like a small thing, except when you know how quickly your kids grow up and they move on and then they don't want to go on vacation with you anymore. Or maybe in the very worst situation, you've lost a loved one to COVID, or someone's very sick and we're grieving that. And we know there's people in our community, many of them, that's happened to. There's a lot of grief to go around, but I also think we've had a lot of opportunity. We've had a lot of opportunity to be around our own children more than we normally would, to slow down and focus on them. We also have an opportunity to do some really, really important legacy work and set an example in our community. Mm-hmm. We at Rochester Community Schools, we use the word love a lot, and I don't think it's trite. I don't think it's overused. I think we can create an organization based on love and service to children that can be a legacy and an example for a lot of other organizations and a lot of other school districts, and at the same time provide really great world-class instruction and service to our community. So as we take stock and grieve the things that we've lost, and more in the losses that we've had, let's also take stock in the opportunities that we have to move forward, offer each other patience and grace, and offer our community world-class service. I hope you have a great afternoon. If you have other questions, please contact us. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.